Francisco Pizarro founded Lima, originally called the City of the Kings, in 1535, and he directed that the first Christian cross in Peru be erected on this mountaintop. We drove out to the important Inca site of Pachacamac, which is located in a desert area just outside the city. There is a small museum where artifacts discovered on the site are displayed. The Incas and other tribes reserved any fertile area for cultivation. We were to discover later on in the holiday that roads were located in the less productive areas. Presumably the same logic applied to dwelling houses and temples. This would explain why this temple is located in a desert area and yet adjacent to the fertile coastal plain. We then went back into the city to view the Museo de la Nación, which houses the nation's best overview of its archaeological heritage. There are many examples of jewellery and pottery that gives a pretty fair idea of what life was like in the area in ancient times. The following day we had a city tour, which included a visit to the cathedral. This building is a reconstruction of an earlier one destroyed by an earthquake in 1746. Pizarro is reputed to be buried here. The area around the presidential palace is very elegant, and no trip to any capital city is complete without viewing the changing of the guard. We had a glimpse of the Pacific Ocean and saw a very British pier. We caught a very early flight to Cusco the next day. Cusco is situated to the southeast of Lima and is about 12,000 feet up in the Andes. Due to a general strike, we had a rest day here, and again we had a very early start the following day for our next destination, Machu Picchu. Part of the journey was undertaken by a 1.5-hour train trip that followed the Vilcanota River up the Sacred Valley. Machu Picchu is arguably both the best and the least well-known archaeological site in the world. Although known to local people, it was not known to the outside world until 1911, when Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it. Nobody knows what was the city's real purpose. It was not known to the Spaniards in the 1500s, and it is now thought that the city had been abandoned before the conquest, which might explain why it was never mentioned to them. After spending some time at this wonder, we retraced our steps down the sacred valley to our hotel. That night, a typical Peruvian band entertained us. One of the songs made me wonder if a lost tribe of Geordies had settled in Peru. Just listen and you will understand what I mean. Told you so. The next morning, we undertook a visit to the village of Ollantaytambo. The village itself is built on Inca foundations. The massive fortress is the site of a major battle, which the Spanish lost. We then continued through the sacred valley and stopped at a bar that served local beer brewed from maize. It looked so vile I couldn't try it myself. But then, I am a Yorkshire bitter man. We then continued up the valley and took the mountain road to Cusco. We made a stop at yet another Inca site for photos and managed to include a llama. The next day we enjoyed a tour of Cusco Cathedral, which was built on the site of an Inca temple. The Incas had experience of building in earthquake zones. The Spanish did not, and when they built cathedrals, churches, etc. on top of Inca foundations, the Spanish buildings collapsed, while the Inca foundations stood firm. Before the conquest, Cusco was the capital of the Inca kingdom. The word Cusco means the navel of the world, which gives some inkling as to the importance that the Incas attached to it. The next day we had yet another early start. This was because we were to travel on the 8 o'clock train from Cusco to Puno, situated on Lake Titicaca. This journey was to be the highlight of the holiday as far as I was concerned. The railway was built by the British at the beginning of the 20th century. It is without doubt the most beautiful and interesting train journey I have ever undertaken. Mind you, travelling in a luxury train did help. We initially followed the Huetana River before crossing the valley to join the Vilcanota River. We were climbing all the way until we reached the summit at La Rea, where we crossed with the eastbound train. The height here is well over 12,000 feet. We then descended to the plains beyond, and as we look out from the observation car and see the mountains receding in the distance, we know it won't be long before we reach our final destination. We gingerly made our way through the streets of Juliaca. The market stalls are very close to the railway, and indeed when we pass, the tracks are taken over by stall holders. When we woke up the next morning and threw back the curtains in our hotel room, we catch our first glimpse of Lake Titicaca. The ship we saw is the Yavari. It is now being restored, and it is hoped to eventually offer cruises to tourists. Speaking of cruises, we enjoyed a boat trip to the floating islands of Euros. While we are getting there, it is worth noting that Titicaca is the world's highest navigable lake at approximately 10,000 feet. It is 153 miles long. It is 35 miles at its widest point and 900 feet at its deepest. So there. At the largest floating island, it was possible to have a trip in a reed boat, for a suitable remuneration, of course. After 2 nights in Puno, we make our way to Juliaca Airport and home. On the way, we spend an all too brief time at Silistani. This is a burial site for a warlike people called the Koli tribe. The tranquility we experienced there belies this fact.